Hey everyone, this is Thyworm and today I want to discuss the latest developer post by Mike. With huge changes to Last Epoch. Enjoying Last Epoch content? Consider subscribing. Last Epoch just announced a massive overhaul of both items and passives. This is good and bad news. The good news is that the game suddenly got a lot more streamlined, less complicated and extremely interesting. The bad news is that all my build guides have become basically useless, so you can expect me revisiting those a few weeks into the patch. You can also watch me play live at twitch.tv/Thyworm every Monday, Thursday and Saturday 8 PM Central European Time. Any questions you may have, I will answer over there. I will be breaking this video down into two sections. First, we will talk about the passives. Second, the itemization. Regarding the passives, 11th Hour Games communicated before, also in the interview with Sarno, that they're not happy with the way you currently get your mastery. When it first was introduced, you just spent time in the UI unlocking it. A couple of major patches ago they implemented a quest with the Forgotten Knight, and while that quest was fine and fit the lore, you had basically already decided your mastery by unlocking the mastery tree, while not having access to your mastery skill, because only the quest gave you access to the new skill. Super confusing of course for new players, and it devalued the whole impact of the quest. This will be solved in 0.7.8 and it has consequences. The base tree now has more passive points to unlock. The 20 points you get now are increased to 30 points based on this picture. This makes sure you are not running out of points to spend until you reach the mastery quest. On top of this, according to Mike, the passives feature stronger passive nodes. That's cool because especially classes like the Primalist have very bland passive trees, and something that's not mentioned, it leaves room for a bunch of additional skills to unlock, because the passive tree was getting a bit cramped, honestly, and this offers the devs some leeway to shuffle around skills and place them in a more logical sequence. I'm sure they will be making use of this option with the new skills announced for the next patch. For new players, the new situation should be a lot clearer. No more questions on why their raptor can't be summoned yet. It should all make sense now, and maybe the quest itself gets upgraded at some point as well, to make it even more clear. I can imagine it gets yet another small overhaul to make it more epic. But then, itemization. Mike is mentioning a few things here. Let's start with the looks. This was mostly covered in my previous video. The 2D art of the items will now be more in line with the 3D character models of the gear. When your item art says you are wearing an iron helmet, you actually see an iron helmet on your character in-game as well. That's nice. Mike says that this visual redesign is solved by adding 32 new body armors and 32 new helmets. They could have solved this in many other ways as well, but this solution offers a lot of opportunities, which I will get into soon. But first, let me drive this point home. They added 32 new body armors and 32 new helmets, each with their own unique stats. That is a massive change. Once again, this has consequences. Each class gets 4 helmets and 4 body armors to choose from. All the old helmets and old body armors are gone. You won't be able to find those anymore. They will still be on your character if you have them right now. They're not all naked after the patch hits, but that's about it. They're going to be cherished memories soon. The new system allows 11th Hour Games to create pieces of gear with specific implicits for certain classes. We already get a preview for that. The Solarian plate now has 350 armor and 35 crit avoidance. 2 implicits will be common. That leaves room for additional affixes now that crit avoidance isn't necessary as an affix anymore, as it is part of the base item. Speaking of affixes, now that we have specific class-targeted gear, we also get specific class-targeted affixes. I can imagine throwing speed for the Sentinel, for example, companion ability refresh perhaps on Primalist. Mike mentions there are 100 new affixes like this coming, which is basically around 25 unique affixes for each class. In a very similar fashion, unique and set items will be locked to classes as well, in some instances. And honestly, that's already sort of the case, where of course the Pebble set belongs to an Acolyte, the Sunforged set belongs to a Sentinel, and the Halvar set belongs to a Primalist. You could argue the same is true for certain uniques, where the Veil root is a Primalist unique. The current system of breaking down gear into affix shards remains unaltered, which means that all these new affixes can be stripped from gear, put on other gear, and hopefully that way create once again OP gear. So let's pause for a moment and look at what this means. Essentially what happens here is a move away from complexity and a step back in RNG. Currently you can roll any affix on any item and it is very hard to create those high-end top tier items. It is pure RNG basically, and combined with the way crafting works with significant chances of breaking gear, it is very time consuming. The impact of RNG in the current system should not be underestimated. On top of this, if you want to do well in endgame, let's say level 60 plus, there are a few requirements your character should meet. A gear check of sorts. You need Lancing Blow, you need crit avoidance, and you need at least one defensive mechanism or a combination of block, dodge, protections or ward. That is the bare minimum to be endgame viable. That is the bare minimum to reach Arena Wave 150 with your average Joe build. This puts a strain on gear, but mostly it puts a strain on the casual players, and I am one of those. They usually understand these requirements, but then get stuck in the gearing process, which is just not that fun in its current state. There's too much RNG, there's too many requirements. To new players, it is also unclear which stats work on certain classes, which is perfectly understandable. There are tooltips, sure, but apart from that, there's nothing to help you get a sense of what is good. Achievement versus strength in the base primal skill tree when you have minions, they have no clue, and that is once again very understandable. All in all, the system is fairly complex. Looking at the new patch, this complexity is reduced. There are only a few items you can wear now on chest and head, and those items come with implicits that benefit your class, and those items come with affixes that benefit your class. You can slap those items on your character, and at the very least there should be some synergy with the build. Complexity is reduced and gearing is much more streamlined. It's great for new players and for casual players, once again like myself. The RNG is heavily reduced as well, as the gearing gets simpler in terms of available affixes, but also in terms of gearing requirements. With additional implicits that cover statistics you should worry about, like crit avoidance, you first of all notify players that this stat exists and is apparently important, and second of all, you reduce the number of affixes required for meeting the endgame gear check. That's a good development because once again a large part of the community that just enjoys the game but isn't really active on the forums will benefit from this, and I think it's amazing that 11th Hour Games recognizes this, acts on it and makes Last Epoch more accessible without sacrificing depth. Because complexity and depth are not the same thing, but they're often mixed up. For the hardcore item hunters crafting the most OP items possible, that option is still there. It wasn't taken away. That chase to perfection still exists. So I think both sides can be happy. Itemization gets less RNG, gearing gets a little easier, and the whole thing is a lot more streamlined and logical. These three factors have some serious advantages. Imagine 11th Hour Games wants to implement something like sockets and gems, or something like enchanting, or something like idols. It's much better to implement systems like that on a streamlined, not very complicated base system than on convoluted RNG based systems. If you put RNG on RNG on RNG, you get Path of Exile crafting where you need to open 3 web pages in order to craft the item you want. On the other hand, if you mix multiple systems that by themselves as standalone systems are streamlined and not overly complex, players can still understand what to do, and there will still be a lot of depth and variety, and the veterans can still go completely ham with niche builds. But at the same time, you keep everything manageable, understandable and playable, which in turn leads to a lot of fun. I compare this with Grim Dawn, for example, that offers players skill trees that you can look at and you have a fairly decent idea of what everything does. You can then bring in another class, another layer with yet another understandable skill tree. Then there is the devotion system with the constellations, pretty cool, and once again you can understand what is going on. And then the gear with sets, uniques, affixes, the whole shebang. Each individual system is not overly complex. All these systems combined have resulted in one of the best action RPGs ever made. This is where I see Last Epoch headed as well. I very much agree with this direction that Last Epoch is taking. I think it is the right approach, which tailors to a larger audience without becoming simplistic. That's my take on the changes. I'm looking forward to playing this, discovering the new gear, the new passives. Thanks for watching, guys and girls, and thanks for all the support, both here and on Twitch. I didn't expect the whole thing to basically kick off with such a bang. We're heading towards 4,000 subs, so many of you followed on Twitch as well, and I'm happy you seem to enjoy the content. See you soon, bye bye.